Okay, let's jump right into this. We're looking at a fascinating theological detective story today. Back in 2023, an author named Zufeng dropped this incredibly intriguing essay that, well, it completely reimagines the origins of humanity. It's this wild thought experiment blending ancient text with some seriously sharp logic. It literally takes what we think we know about the universe and just flips it on its head. So, let's unpack the creation paradox. So, first up, who actually created humanity? You know, most people assume the answer is super obvious, right? But Su Feng brings this really unique, dual pronged argument to the table to challenge our core assumptions. He doesn't just lean on faith here, he actually uses biblical text as a factual baseline and then builds this whole structural framework using philosophical logic. Let's break down both of these prongs.
But before we get too deep into the weeds, we absolutely have to define the ultimate architect. I mean, if we're going to talk about a creator, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with. In Xu Feng's interpretation, the entity he calls the greatest creator has two absolutely critical features for our explainer today. First off, uniqueness. Basically, there is only one greatest creator in the entire universe. It's completely singular, zero duplicates. Second, amorphousness, meaning the greatest creator doesn't have a fixed physical form. It can take on any image or just stay entirely formless. So keep those two concepts, singular and formless, tucked away in your mind because they are literally the key to unlocking this whole paradox.
Now, the foundation of the textual argument actually comes straight from a really specific factual clue in the book of Genesis. Chapter 1, verse 26. It says, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image according to our likeness.'" Now look closely at the phrasing there. We really want to zero in on that highly perplexing use of the plural pronouns us and our. And here is where we hit a massive textual paradox. Think back to that definition we just went over a second ago. If the greatest creator is absolutely unique, meaning there is literally only one of them, how on earth can a singular, unique entity refer to itself as a we? Sui-Thing points out that if the entity speaking in Genesis says, "Let us make man in our image," well then humanity was actually created by a numerous collective, not a single being. I mean, a truly unique entity wouldn't say us. So the text itself is basically screaming at us that plural beings were doing the creating. And this perfectly illustrates the major linguistic shift Shuifeng is arguing for. Basically, over centuries, we've mistakenly smashed two entirely different concepts together. On one hand, we have the plural, lowercase gods, who, according to Genesis, actually created us in their collective image. And then, on the other hand, we have the singular, uppercase God, who is the unique, greatest creator. The argument here is that we've taken the unique creator and accidentally equated him with the plural gods, who, frankly, did the actual hands-on work.
So here's the crucial takeaway from the textual investigation. The conclusion is that the Bible itself points to humans being made by a collective of gods. Because of all this historical linguistic confusion, Su Feng says there's a huge need to clarify our terms. Instead of using the super culturally loaded and honestly confusing term God to describe the ultimate source of the universe, he proposes we just rename that singular formless entity the greatest creator. That leaves the term gods for the plural beings who actually made us. Pretty elegant, right? And with that, we've solved the first half of the puzzle.
Okay, that wraps up the whole textual side of things. Now let's pivot and look at the logic. If the greatest creator didn't make us directly, well, why not? To answer that, the author throws out a deeply philosophical, kind of heavy question. Where does the true meaning of life actually lie? Let's do a little thought experiment and imagine an alternative reality. We'll call it the all-providing universe. Imagine if the greatest creator directly created everything and handed you every single necessity, like handling your birth, your aging, magically curing your illnesses, managing your death, and literally handing you all your food, clothing, and shelter. What would you actually do all day? If all living beings were born solely to just sit back and enjoy these endless provisions, would the universe hold any actual joy or vitality? Seriously, if you have absolutely zero responsibilities and everything is just handed to you on a silver platter, does your existence actually mean anything at all? To really ground this cosmic idea, let's use a super relatable earthly analogy from the essay. Imagine being born to a seriously overbearing father. And I don't just mean a helicopter parent, I mean, well, actually, imagine a father who feeds you, bathes you, clothes you, and physically carries you everywhere so your feet never even touch the ground. He fulfills every single need for your entire life. You literally never lift a finger. Would a life that incredibly dependent have any true meaning? Or would it just be this empty, terribly boring existence?
So, the logical conclusion here is pretty simple. A life without effort is a life without joy. Shufeng posits that the greatest creator experienced the ultimate, supreme joy through the sheer act of creation itself. Creating is just inherently joyful. But rather than hoarding all that joy by creating every single thing in the universe directly, the greatest creator decided to delegate. He wanted to pass that exact same happiness down the line so other beings could experience the profound thrill of creating something themselves.
And this establishes a really intricate hierarchical chain of creation, mapping out exactly how the universe was populated step by step. First, the greatest creator experiences joy by making gods and angels. Second, to let those gods and angels feel that same joy, they get tasked with creating. So the gods make humans and the angels create animals, plants, and microorganisms. And third, the chain reaches us. To allow humans to experience the joy of creation, we're given a world full of raw materials so we can make our own houses, cars, machines, and art, which gives us this perfectly structured hierarchy of delegation. You can see the greatest creator sitting right at the origin point, delegating down to gods and angels. The gods create humanity, and then at the bottom, we humans create tools, wealth, and infrastructure. The essay argues that this specific system, giving beings raw resources to invent and build for themselves, is precisely what fills the universe with vitality, purpose, and joy. It's a universe built for active participants, not just passive consumers. So after walking through the biblical text with that plural us, and then this logical thought experiment about needing to delegate for joy, we really need to pause and ask the big question. Why does this philosophical distinction actually matter to us today? What's the practical value? Well, according to the essay, the value of this framework is massive. It fundamentally changes how we view the hardships of reality. First off, it empowers us by totally separating the greatest creator from the world's evils. When humans do terrible things, or when we see the brutal, cruel laws of the animal kingdom, we don't have to blame the greatest creator. Actually, those things were the designs and actions of the downstream creators, the gods, the angels, and us humans. Second, it shifts the ultimate responsibility and purpose right back onto our own shoulders. We aren't supposed to just sit around waiting for divine provisions. We're supposed to get out there and utilize the resources around us. And that brings us to the empowering thesis of the author's entire argument. It's beautifully captured in this single line from the text. Creation is the source of all happiness. Think about that. True joy doesn't come from being provided for. It doesn't come from having everything handed to you by some cosmic father figure. It comes from rolling up your sleeves and engaging in the act of creation yourself, just like the greatest creator did at the very beginning of time. Which leaves us with a pretty profound call to action. By understanding the structure of the universe, you start to realize that your ultimate purpose is to build, to make, and to invent. So if you truly want to experience joy and find real meaning and value in your life, what are you going to choose to create today? I really hope this explainer has sparked your curiosity about the universe, the ancient texts we rely on, and of course, your own limitless potential within it.